won't wage an emergency.
This is Alex Murdaugh at 4147 Moselle Road. I need the police to answer immediately. My wife and child got badly.
Well, good afternoon, friends. I'm Franky, and this is the Think Tank. We're here for the afternoon session on the Alex Murdaugh case. And in the meantime, we've been looking at eagle cams, which have been really, really enjoyable. There's one that's on eggs, and then I've got two other ones that are hatched. So I'm just trying to find the best view for these ones. They are, let's check this one out, guys. Yeah. So on this one, I just watched Mom. She has been hunting. Look at all the fish there. It makes me wonder if the weather's going to change back to not friendly, because holy crap, are they stocking up? Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And the one, I can't tell which one right now. The dark one, that one, was actually over not long ago picking at the meat. Oh, there we go. I refreshed it. I'll make this bigger again. Give it some volume, see if we hear anything at all. So again, this is Alex and Andrea. So I don't see freckles on the head. So if it's a dark part of the bottom of his tail feathers, then it's Dad. But I'm pretty sure it is, because she said Mom, Andrea has got like freckles on her head. That one, like I'm noticing the one has quite a few feathers, and the other one has still got, what were they called? Like pin feathers? Is that what they were called? Oh, look. Nice. Nice. Just amazing. So we're learning a lot about Murdaugh's finances right now, aren't we? Lots been going on as far as that goes. Millions and millions of dollars he owes people, companies. I mean, there's fraud charges. He's in deep caca, deep guano. It's, he's doing it to himself, or he did it to himself. And as far as, we're all going to have our own opinions, but as far as what happened out at, Moselle, is that what they call it? He is not looking very, very good at this moment. Not really impressed. If it's not him, I'm not saying they're going to convict him, but in my opinion, things are not looking good for him. I see Buster came back in the morning. He must not have stayed for the beginning this morning. Oh, what's going on here? She's timing out. I'll refresh it. Yeah, just a lot of interesting things came out this morning. I've heard that, I don't know what's going on here. It's not me. Mine's all good. But you know what? We'll try a different one. Yeah, if it's not him, I will be shocked. Like I say, hey, there's still a good chance that this one, I'm not sure if JJ's back, but he will like this one. Yeah, if to me, it's just the more I hear, the more guilty I think he is. So I'm not being convinced otherwise, but we always know more than the jury does, don't we? This bird's got the best view. And what was it we heard this morning? Like, they can see for miles and miles. So look at their view. Amazing. So this one's on eggs. And since we started streaming this, oh, looky. There's always, she's like, you've been gone all night and you smell like beer. And where's the food? Where is the food? You didn't even bring the food. Hangs his head. Yeah. I'm just going to go over here and tidy up the nest, and you just do whatever it is you want to do. Go brush your teeth. Oh, I hope the volume's here. Sorry, guys. Amazing. Well, hello, Blifton. Check this out, eh? 2 eggs. Switching positions. Okay, I'll sit here. You just go buy yourself something nice. Bye. So Dandy was saying a lot of these birds that, you know how a lot of there she goes. I'm out of here. I'm not. Don't even look at me. Oh, wow. Isn't that amazing? Oh my God. Just the right position. But yeah, Dandy was saying this morning that some birds, that the female isn't like, usually they're brown or something, not too vibrant, and the guys are like the vibrant ones. With eagles, there is really no way to tell between the male and the female. And a lot of times they have to have DNA testing done, I guess, which I found very interesting. Okay, I'll clean up the nest a little bit. Damn, she's done it all already. I'll just move this little sticky thing over here. Yeah, these eggs have constantly been laid on. Oh yeah, big man. That's right. That's right. Just move that little piece over here. Nah, I'm not going to bother. She won't notice. Are you serious, Maxie? Haha, did I ever tell you about the time someone started yelling at me because they got sold a female bird and they wanted a male? Well, yeah. If they can find the parts, well, let them. Because I'm not going digging. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. Sadly I didn't have the volume on, but he just came in, he or she, and it looked like she was like, what the hell? And he's like, I was just out with the guys, I wasn't supposed to be all night, but then I thought you'd probably like it if I didn't fly home drunk, so I stayed where I was. Oh, that's funny. I was interested in the condo, so I didn't bother to cut them off and tell them they were calling a wrong number. Oh my goodness. Seems like the snow might be melting a little bit, and the water seems to be. Oh, I know. Don't fly home drunk. He forgot the salmon. He smelt like beer. Oh, just about, girlfriend. Yeah. Damn. So now he's repenting and like kind of trying to clean up the nest a little bit, but she had already done it all. Wow. Yeah, I could watch this forever. Yes, that's exactly what I was saying. Has been out with the boys again. It's okay. He pulled in, she moved, he sat down, and she flocked off. You just had one. You just had one, though, you two. Oh, you think you need another one? Oh, my word. Okay, last treat. Last treat. Didn't bring home the salmon. Smells like beer. Didn't make it home till late in the day. So I did, let's see here. I'm going to let you guys look at that. I found polar bears. Africa, but it's gazelles and it's dark. And it doesn't seem like the Racoon Saloon is very active. I noticed that there's cameras that's different parts of the house. And this is the living room. There's a shed. There's probably a kitchen. And I've seen them tootle upstairs. So I bet you they actually sleep upstairs. They probably have something there for them. Let me see here. Let's look at the babies. Well, hello, James. Good to see you, friend. So, is this the one? Let's do that. Alex and Andrea. And she brought them in a lot of fish. So it makes me wonder if it's going to storm. Dandy figures within the week they will possibly start trying to fly. She said it happens very quick. Are raccoons nocturnal? I bet you they are. Okay, guys, court is in session. Bring in the jury. I'm going to mute out, friends.
present, sir.
Thank you. You may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court.
Yes, sir.
Beginning with items, states exhibits 111, 112, 113. I believe right before we broke, I presented to counsel and was going to offer it to the witness, and I believe it was without objection going to be offered into evidence.
Move without objection.
All right, Agent or Mr. Greer, please review what's been marked as states exhibit 111, 112, 113, which would align with slide items 66, 69, and 104. If you would, please let us know if you had an opportunity to inspect those items and analyze them.
Yes, sir, I did. States Exhibit 112 is sled item 66, and that was determined to be 3 fired bullet jacket fragments and 7 pieces of lead listed as from Margaret Murdaugh at autopsy. States Exhibit 11.
111?
Yes, sir, excuse me, I apologize. 111 is sled item 69. And that is 1 combination wad listed as from left axilla of Paul Murdaugh at autopsy. And States Exhibit 113 is sled item 104. And that was 1 birdshot pellet listed as found with Paul Murdaugh's clothing.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Greer, I'm going to direct your attention to States Exhibit 90, slide item 31. Did you have an opportunity to inspect this item?
I did inspect sled item 31.
Is this the item you inspected?
This firearm is unloaded, safe to handle. Yes, sir, I see my identifying marks as sled item 31 on this firearm.
Tell us what this is.
And that was determined to be 1 Browning model Auto 5 Light 12 semi-automatic shotgun, 12 gauge with serial number 03867NV211.
And did you conduct further examinations on that firearm that we'll discuss in a little bit?
Yes, sir, I did.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as States Exhibit and entered into evidence. States Exhibit 89, item 30 on your report. Did you have an opportunity to inspect that firearm?
This firearm is also unloaded. Yes, sir, I did.
How do you know that?
When I'm looking at these firearms, we scribe our evidence if possible in multiple locations. So I'm looking for those identifying features of that sled lab number and that item number, as well as my initials on some of these items that I was able to mark that. So I see that on this firearm.
Thank you. And for purposes of our results that we'll discuss shortly, did you conduct additional testing on that firearm?
Yes, sir.
Handing you what's been marked as and entered into evidence as States Exhibit 91. That'd be your sled item number 32. Tell me if you recognize that firearm, if you, in fact, were the one that received it and conducted examinations on it.
This firearm is also unloaded. I'm going to look again for those identifying marks. Yes, sir. I identify this as my sled item 32.
Lastly, I'll direct your attention to what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 91, I'm sorry, State's Exhibit 88, and sled item 33. Are you familiar with that item?
This firearm is also unloaded. Yes, sir. I am familiar with this item.
Is that the item that you conducted tests on?
Yes, sir. This is the sled item 33.
Direct your attention then to State's Exhibit 210, which would be sled item 34. That's been entered into evidence collectively as State's item 210. Are you familiar with the contents of that evidence package?
Yes, sir, I am.
And what are they?
Sled item 34, State's Exhibit 210, was determined to be 1 magazine and 26 unfired cellular and bellow 300 blackout caliber cartridges.
It was sled item 34, but this State's Exhibit 210 included with the rifle we just took a look at?
Yes, sir. It was submitted in the same package as the rifle.
All right, moving on to State's Exhibit 143 through, State's Exhibit 143, 144, 150, and 148. Entered into evidence already. That would be sled items 166, 167, 168, and 169.
Yes, sir.
And then what's been marked as those exhibits. Would you please take a chance to review those? Let me know if you're familiar with them and if you had an opportunity to analyze them.
Yes, sir. I believe I have seen these items.
Okay. Tell us what they are, if you would.
Each of these 4 items are 12 gauge federal shot shells, and they each all have the markings that are consistent with each other: a federal premium double aught buck 3-inch magnum.
Do your notes indicate where they were located?
I have an indication based on the packaging.
Okay, what did the packaging indicate?
The packaging for State's Exhibit 150 from what I can tell, says from red bin on workshop bench. For State's Exhibit 144 says from red bin on workshop bench. State's Exhibit 143 says from red bin on workshop bench. And State's Exhibit 148 also says from red bin on workshop bench.
All right, thank you. I'm now going to hand you what's been previously entered into evidence as State's Exhibits 145, 146, 147, and 149. That would be sleds number 162, 163, 164, and 165. Same as before. If you wouldn't mind, please take a look at those and let me know if you are familiar with their contents.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tell us what they are.
All four of these items are Winchester 12 gauge shot shells, and they all appear to have the same information on the shot shell of dry lock 3-inch with the number 2.
I'm going to hand you what's been previously entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 213, sled item 45. Please take a look at that piece of evidence and let me know if you are aware of what it is.
Yes, sir. This appears to be a box for ammunition in the 300 blackout caliber.
And does that box indicate the maker of that 300 blackout ammunition?
It does.
Who's the manufacturer?
Cellular and Billow.
S&B?
Yes, sir.
All right, this is State's Exhibit 260, which was previously marked for identification purposes only. State's Exhibit 260 contains sled items 35, 36, 37, 38, and 39. Mr. Greer, I'm handing you what's been now admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit 260. Please take if you would, please take a moment to review those items and let me know if you're familiar with them.
Yes, sir. I am familiar with this evidence.
And what are they?
These are sled items 35 through 39. These were each fired 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases with the head stamp of Cellular and Billow.
Thank you. What's been marked previously as State's Exhibit 261 for identification purposes only. Just to reference sled item numbers 108 to 135. Collectively. Greer. These items now admitted under State's Exhibit, as State's Exhibit 261. Please take a moment to review those items, any notes or information you might have on them, and let me know if you're aware of what they are.
Yes, container AB was submitted to the laboratory, and it is to contain sled items 108 through 135. I am familiar with these items, and this package appears to not have been tampered with since I sealed it last, as I see my initials and seal date there at the bottom.
And what's inside that package?
Inside this package, there are 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases, as well as 12 gauge shot shells.
And did you have an opportunity to perform an analysis on these items?
Yes, sir, I did.
Mr. Greer, I'm offering you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 398. That would reference sled item 22.4. And I believe without objection, we'll offer it as evidence. If you would, please take a look at that item and cross-reference with your report and let me know if you're familiar with what it is.
Yes, sir. This container contains 2 sled items. That's sled item 22.4, which is a swab of debris that I took, a reddish brown debris swab from the right side of the item 22 receiver.
Which item is 22?
Item 22 was the camouflage Benelli model Super Black Eagle 3 semi-automatic shotgun. And it also contains sled item 22.5, which was another swab from that same shotgun, and that was reddish brown debris swab from the left side of the item 22 receiver above manufacturer information.
And tell us a little bit about the swabs and what you're looking for with that.
Yes, sir. When I receive items of evidence, a part of my process in documenting the evidence and opening the evidence is to look to see if there's any foreign or trace material on that item. When I was examining this firearm and opening it for the first time, I took note of that. And when I did that, I noticed those two areas that I saw reddish brown debris. In order to preserve that prior to my examination, I swabbed those items so that way they could be collected and maintained.
All right, Mr. Greer, I'm handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 399, which references sled item 22.7. State would offer that into evidence after you identify it, and I believe without objection.
Yes, sir. I do recognize this, and this package is still sealed with my initials and seal date. Item 22.7 was the unfired 12-gauge shot shell that was submitted with the item 22 camouflage Benelli Super Black Eagle 3 shotgun. During my testing, I used that submitted ammunition that came with the firearm to test fire the weapon with, and that is represented here as sled item 22.7, State's Exhibit 399.
Okay. Submitted.
All right, Mr. Greer. Before we move on to your analysis, the results. If you would, please tell me a little bit about the firearms identification process and the number of ways that you use to identify whether a firearm shot a particular projectile.
Sure. As we were discussing earlier, when I receive evidence into the laboratory and I begin my examination, there's a lot of documentation that has to happen. First, as we're opening the evidence, we're going to, one, make sure to preserve any of that trace or foreign material. We use photography to document the evidence as we're opening it and to photograph the actual item itself and that trace material or foreign material. We also use a lot of departmental worksheets where I take notes on the firearm, the magazine, the fired components such as the cartridge case or the bullet, and also any other thing that we need to document throughout the process, or unfired cartridges. We take note of all of that, writing down all of these characteristics that we're seeing on the evidence. In order to do our examination, though, we have to look at these fired ammunition components, these cartridge cases and these fired bullets, and look at their class characteristics. So we're going to count on a bullet. We're going to look at its rifling, trying to determine its caliber through weight and measuring it, and counting those number of lands and grooves that comprise that rifling, like we spoke earlier. That's what gives that bullet that twist. We document that. We may also look at those cartridge case and look at those things that have the same class characteristics. That could be the caliber of that cartridge case, the shape of that firing pin, and any overall features. Items that share the same class characteristics will compare together. And it's kind of like climbing a ladder at this point. Those items that share the same class characteristics, we climb to the next step on that ladder and we compare those items. We're going to look at those fired bullets with each other, those fired cartridge cases with each other, and we're going to look at all of that under high magnification. We use a comparison microscope in our laboratory to look at these items. And basically, if you think back to a biology lab that you may have had in school or some kind of science lab, when you look through a microscope, that's what we're doing. But we're using this comparison microscope to look at two things at one time. And we use it uses an ocular bridge so we can look through like a set of binoculars to look at these things. We can change the angles that we're looking at, all these tiny little scratches and striations, impressions on the evidence that you can't really see with the naked eye. We're going to look at it under that magnification and compare all of that to each other to help us reach our final goal, which is a conclusion. If we have firearms that are submitted, we'll also have that documented. Those firearms that have the same class characteristics, for instance, if we have a gun that's the same caliber as our fired bullet and it shares the same rifling specifications, then that means we can compare that bullet with test fires from the firearm. So I'll make sure the firearm is safe to fire, and we'll shoot that firearm within our laboratory. We have several different ways to do that with a water recovery tank and a tunnel that we're able to shoot and recover those test specimens that I physically shot from the firearm. I'll compare those test specimens with each other to look at how those marks that I was looking for under the microscope that we were talking about, to see how they're reproducing on those test fires in whether that be a bullet or cartridge case, compare that under the microscope, and then compare that where necessary to the submitted evidence. After looking at all that, I reach a conclusion about whether this was fired by this item or not, or whatever that conclusion may be. I arrive at that, and I write that conclusion down. At that point in time, another qualified examiner within our firearms department will review the evidence themselves. They'll look at all the submitted evidence and compare that with each other and with those test specimens that I fired and arrive at their own conclusion. If they're in agreement, then they'll sign off on my conclusions and a report can be drafted. And that's how we get the information out to our customers through our report. At SLED, we have the 100% micro verification process where everything that we're issuing a conclusion on is reviewed by another examiner. So that case file, all that documentation that I generate goes to that examiner or reviewer. It undergoes a technical review and administrative review before a report can be released. And in a nutshell, that's how we work each case. There are different parts, there's different items of evidence that we get in each case, but that's a quick overview of how each case has worked, and those that process was applied to this case.
Thank you. Mr. Greer, speaking of the peer review process that goes on in the lab, is that conducted blindly, meaning the person reviewing your report doesn't know what your findings are?
That's correct.
Okay. Could you explain? So the subsequent reviewer doesn't know what you decided in your first prime opinion. Is that right?
Right. I'll look at the evidence myself, arrive at a conclusion, and the second examiner will look at it and come to their conclusion on their own. Once they have arrived at their own conclusion, looking at the evidence with their own eyes on the microscope, they'll read my results to see if they're in agreement with what I have determined or not.
And that, I think you just testified, but was that done in this case?
Yes, sir, it was.
Before we move on, please tell me what it means for a cartridge casing to be cycled through a weapon. What does that mean?
Sure. If you think back when we were looking at the cartridge earlier, an unfired cartridge, when we look at these items under magnification on the microscope, there are several different areas that we're going to be concerned with in looking at for those microscopic scratches and impressions, those little striations. One of those would be a firing pin, and that's what comes through the breech face of the gun to detonate the primer. Also the breech face marks on that primer from the gun. Ejector marks, that's what kicks that cartridge out of the gun or the cartridge case. Extractor marks, that's what pulls it out of the chamber of the firearm so that it can be kicked out. And also chamber marks, and that's on the body of the cartridge case, that cylindrical portion. So when we're looking at evidence, our ultimate goal is to say something was fired by this gun or they were fired by the same gun. And we do that, and we can rely on those firing pin marks and those breech face marks because that's what struck the primer and caused it to detonate and fire that cartridge. There's other things that we can look at just to single out like extractor marks and ejector marks and chamber marks of such that we can look at to say that a cartridge has traveled through a gun. For example, if you were to load a magazine, insert it into a semi-automatic firearm, pull the slide back, load that cartridge into the chamber, and then you decide you're not going to shoot or you need to remove that cartridge for any reason, you would pull back on that slide of the handgun and the cartridge would be extracted out of the chamber and ejected. Through that process, there can be marks left on the cartridge. That also would happen when you're firing it, but that's not what detonated that primer and set that off. Those ejector marks, those extractor marks. And that just means that that cartridge, we can say, has traveled through that firearm at one point in time. That's not to say it was fired by, but it's cycling marks that we're seeing as it's cycled through that gun.
So is it accurate to say then that the cycling marks are separate and distinct from the actual firing pin marks that when you're reviewing these under a microscope?
Yes, sir. As far as what we're looking at geographically on the cartridge case, those would be in a different location when we're looking for those ejector marks or extractor marks or chamber marks. That's not something that we typically would be seeing on the primer area that detonated that cartridge.
Thank you. If I could, beginning with your results, if we could begin with your examination of all the shotgun shells, so the actual shells that were retrieved as part of your analysis, beginning with sled items 9 and 10, which would be states item 33 and 34. Could you tell me where these items were retrieved? Remind us where these items were retrieved from, first of all.
Sled items 9 and 10, that's State's Exhibit 33 and 34. Item 9 was from marker 9, and item 10 was from marker 10, which is my understanding that it was at the feed or storage room.
And I'm going to put these on the Elmo, but if you would tell us what your analysis of these items revealed.
Yes, sir.
Objection to these opinions based on the prior rule.
Please proceed.
Yes, sir. When I compared and examined those two shot shells with each other, I determined that those two shot shells had been fired by the same firearm.
And do you know the make and model of, or the make and manufacturer of those two weapons, projectiles or shells?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right.
Sled
Item
item 9. Yes, sir.
Which, item 9 is which item?
Item 9 is the red and color shot shell, which is State's Exhibit 34.
Okay.
That was a federal premium double-aught buck 3-inch Magnum shot shell. And sled item 10 is the black and color shot shell, State's Exhibit 33. And that is a fired 12-gauge Winchester Drylock number 2 shot shell.
All right, Mr. Greer, moving on to referencing item 22 collectively.
Yes, sir.
State's Exhibit 399, 22.7 on your report.
Yes, sir.
This would be State's Exhibit 399. Did you have an opportunity, or could you tell us what that is?
Yes, sir. That was the unfired 12-gauge shot shell that was submitted originally with the item 22 shotgun, which is the camouflage color Benelli shotgun.
Could you go ahead and open that package for us, please?
Yes, sir. Do you have scissors or just?
Remind us again where that item was retrieved from.
This item was originally submitted with the item 22 camouflage Benelli shotgun that was submitted to the laboratory.
Meaning it was actually loaded into the shotgun?
When I received it, it was not loaded in the shotgun, but this was an unfired shot shell as it was submitted. This is the shot shell that I test fired in that shotgun.
All right, very good. Thank you. Tell us, I'll put it on the Elmo. Tell us what the make and manufacturer of this item is.
Yes, sir. This is also a 12-gauge federal shot shell, and on the shot shell itself, it also says Federal Premium Double-Aught Buck 3-inch Magnum.
Direct your attention back to State's item 34. Are those two items consistent with each other?
Yes, sir. It does appear that they are consistent in construction and their head stamp information.
If you would, since let's work through the number of firearms that were identified by you. Did you have an opportunity to test those firearms with the projectiles retrieved?
Yes, sir, I did.
What were your results for item 30, the Mossberg pump action shotgun?
In regards to the 2 shot shells,
Correct.
my results after examining that, it was determined that the item 30 shotgun did not fire the items 9 and 10 shot shells.
And could you move on to your item 31, states item, one moment, I'm sorry. And the item you just referenced was states item 89, the Mossberg shotgun. States exhibit 90, sled item 31. Please tell us about that item.
Yes, sir. Based on my examination, I was able to determine that item 31 was not fired by, that item 31 did not fire items 9 and 10.
All right, concerning states exhibit 91, your sled item 32, that would be a Benelli Super Black Eagle 2, black in color. Could you tell us your results of that?
Yes, sir. Based on my examination, it was determined that item 32 did not fire items 9 and 10.
Item 32 was, however, recovered with a number of rounds in it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
And what were those rounds?
Item 32, the Benelli model Super Black Eagle 2 shotgun, was submitted with 2 unfired 12-gauge shot shells, Federal and Winchester.
All right, did you have an opportunity to compare the shot shells with item 22, the camouflage color Benelli Super Black Eagle 3?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right, and if you would, please tell us your findings concerning item 22.
Sure. When I compared sled items 9 and 10 with those test shot shells that I fired through the item 22 camouflage shotgun, the results of those comparisons were inconclusive. I was unable to determine whether or not items 9 and 10 were fired by item 22 or if they had been fired by another firearm with similar characteristics.
And were you able to eliminate item number 33 from this round of testing concerning the shotgun shells?
That's correct. The shotgun shells were not fired by the item 33 rifle.
Moving on to your results, moving on to your testing, or did you conduct additional testing of 300 blackout rounds?
Yes, sir, I did.
And of the cases of the ammunition, both fired, spent, so shell casings, or unfired ammunition, were the ones we examined today that were retrieved from the scene, what make and manufacturer were they of?
The cartridge cases were head stamped with the S&B logo and 300 blackout caliber.
Did you have an opportunity to test fire and examine sled item 33, states exhibit 88, the 300 blackout rifle, black in color?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right. Could you please tell us your results from that examination for that weapon?
In regards to test firing the weapon?
Correct.
Yes, sir. When I examined the item 33, I test fired it using the item 34 magazine. That was the magazine that was packaged alongside the rifle. During that test firing, the first available cartridge in the magazine, as I inserted the magazine into the firearm, it was fed and chambered into the rifle correctly and as I expected. The cartridge was successfully test fired, and then it extracted and ejected from the rifle again as I expected it to. However, as the firearm cycled, meaning when that bolt was coming back forward to load the next available cartridge in the magazine, it failed to feed that cartridge into the chamber, and I had to manually cycle it to load the next cartridge into the chamber. That issue did not prevent me from test firing the firearm, and no further analysis to determine that cause was conducted.
referencing your results, slide item 128 in your exam, were you able to identify any cartridge casings that would have been fired by item 33 rifle? Your item 33 states exhibit 90, states exhibit 88.
Yes, sir, I was.
And just to be clear, we're talking about this 300 blackout rifle. Is that correct? We're talking about your item 33?
Yes, sir. That is sled item 33 that I examined and test fired.
What were you able to identify with the rounds recovered, 300 blackout rounds recovered? Please list their item numbers as well.
Yes, sir. So I compared all the 300 blackout cartridges that I received, and based on my examinations and comparisons, I was able to determine that sled item 38, 109, 110, 121, 126, and 127 were fired by the item 33 rifle.
And those would be various items that were recovered that we've been through and identified in the state's exhibits. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So some of them you would say were fired by item 33.
That is correct.
I know you mentioned before with item 33, or sorry, state's exhibit 89. I'm sorry, state's exhibit 88. I know you'd mentioned before that it wasn't working properly. Does that inhibit your ability to test it in any way?
No, sir, I was able to test fire that firearm and recover those test specimens that I needed in order to make those comparisons.
Do malfunctions occur in firearms from time to time?
Yes, sir, they can occur.
But nevertheless, you were able to simulate you were able to fire the weapon eventually.
Yes, sir, I was able to test fire the weapon and recover those test specimens that I needed.
All right, I'm going to reference sled items 2 through 7, 35 through 37, 39, 108, 111 through 120. Do you understand which items I'm referencing?
Yes, sir, I do.
And how did you compare those, or how did the analysis go when compared with item 33, states item 88?
Yes, sir. When I compared those items, that was items 2 through 7, 35 through 37, 39, 108, 111 through 120, and 122 through 124, and 128 with each other. And when I compared those with those test specimens that I fired through item 33, the results of those comparisons were inconclusive. Again, that means I was unable to determine if they had been fired by item 33 or they had been fired by another firearm or firearms with similar characteristics.
Still on item 33, states exhibit 88, the recovered 300 blackout rifle. Were you able to compare the ejection and extraction marks of various 300 blackout rounds recovered and casings recovered?
Yes, sir.
And what was your findings concerning some of those items? And please list the items, and we will go back and identify states exhibits in a minute.
Yes, sir. In looking at the mechanism marks on items 111, 114 through 115, 118 through 119, 123, and 128, I was able to determine that those items had all been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the item 3 rifle, the item 33 rifle at some previous time.
All right. Mr. Rder, I'm going to ask you.
I'm going to renew my objection to the next opinion that he's about to offer based on our prior rulings, just for the record.
Yes, sir. It's not,
Prior arguments and understanding the court's rule.
yes, sir.
Mr. Rder, I'm going to real quick reference on your chart, on your list, items marked sled items 2 through 7, 35, 36, and 37, and sled item 39. And that would be states exhibits 63 through 68. And just please verify that I've handed you states exhibits 63 through 68 and identify if they correlate to items 2 through 7 on your chart.
Yes, sir. These states exhibit 63 through 68 are sled items 2 through 7.
And then I'm going to show you what's been marked as Take the court's indulgence. States Exhibit 260. States Exhibit 250, which correlates to sled items 35 through 39. Please verify that for me.
Yes, sir. This is States Exhibit 260, which is a container that is to contain sled items 35 through 39.
Sled items 2 through 7. States Exhibit 63 through 68. After review of the crime scene, where were those located?
After reviewing the crime scene diagram, it's my understanding that those cartridge cases were at marker numbers that were near or around the body of Margaret Murdaugh.
And those would be 300 blackout rounds, is that right?
That's correct. They're 300 blackout caliber.
Or they were spent casings?
Yes, sir. Those are fired cartridge cases.
And States Exhibit 260, items 35 through 39, what are those again?
Those were all fired 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases, head stamped with the S&B logo and 300 blackout caliber.
And where were those items recovered?
Listed on our submission documents, those were from the ground at side entrance door.
Have you physically been there to the Moselle property?
Yes, sir, I have.
Are you familiar with the ground at the side entrance door?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
Is that the side entrance that leads into the pool table and the gun room?
Based on my understanding of the scene, yes, sir. I believe that is where those were collected from, near that door that goes into that room.
We have 300 blackout round casings collected from around Maggie's body, and we have 300 casings collected from the house. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you have any notes? Did you take any contemporaneous notes on the condition of your items 35 to 39, those collected at the side of the house?
Yes, sir, I do believe so. I'm going to reference my case file here to confirm.
Would referencing your file help you refresh your memory on that matter?
Yes, sir, it would. During my examination, when I looked at items 35 through 39, which were recovered near that door area, I did note that they were tarnished and weathered in my case file.
Mr. Rder, tell us what you found concerning those items.
Based on my examination, it was determined that items 2 through 7, 35 through 37, and 39 had matching mechanism marks, and it was concluded that those items had been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
So if I understand it correctly, the items collected right by Maggie had been loaded into, extracted to, and ejected by the same firearm that identified that items were picked up by the side of the house.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Additional items were collected as well, and did you have an opportunity to analyze those?
Yes, sir, I did.
And identify the sled item numbers, and then we'll identify the state's exhibit numbers.
Those were sled items number 108, 113.
And you what's been marked as state's exhibit 261, which includes various items. And what are they again?
Yes, sir. This is a container that contains multiple 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases and fired 12 gauge shot shells.
And in that in that collected bin include 300 blackout rounds of the items you just listed?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right, tell us what your findings were for those items. And
Um,
where were these collected?
Based on the submission documentation, those were collected from areas such as from to the left of a shooting chair near field, from a right corner near field, from in front of a shooter's chair under a table. Would you like me to identify each location?
For those items, have you had an opportunity to review some body worn camera footage and evidence and kind of identify what that actually meant?
Oh, yes, sir.
What and generally when it says left leg and right leg and near the front or back, what is it talking about?
It appears that there's some type of a shooting area that those were collected from.
What were your findings concerning those items?
It was determined that those items, and to include items 108, 113, 116, 117, and 122, also had those same matching mechanism marks, to conclude that they had been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm as those at the crime scene around Margaret Murdaugh's body, and those several recovered from the home.
So the items collected around Margaret Murdaugh's body matched the items collected outside the house, which matched items that were collected in the field at the shooting range.
Yes, sir. I was able to identify that the cartridge cases recovered items 2 through 7 near the body did have matching mechanism marks with several of the items from the area around the home and those in the shooting field, and several of those in the shooting field, to conclude that some of those had been, that those had been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
So I'm going to reference slide item 8. That would be state's item 250, state's exhibit 250. I'm going to put it on the screen. What is that item again? Remind us, please.
Sled item 8 was one fired bullet determined to be 300 blackout caliber, listed as near tire impression at marker 8.
Recovered from the scene.
Yes, sir, at marker 8.
Is that a fire projectile?
Yes, sir, that is a fired bullet.
Is that, how much does that bullet weigh?
According to my notes, when I weighed that projectile, it weighed approximately 147.4 grains.
And what's marked as exhibit 213. Remind us again what that is.
State's exhibit 213 appears to be an ammunition box marked cellular and below, and 300 blackout caliber.
What are the grains indicated on that box?
On the side of this box, it has information about the projectile, and it says 147 grains on the side.
Is state's exhibit up on the Elmo, is that consistent with a 147 grain projectile?
Yes, sir. That bullet appears to be intact. And based on my examination and looking at these fired bullets as a part of an examination, I would say that would be consistent with being 147 grains.
An opportunity to inspect sled item 12.
Yes, sir, I did.
Tell us your results of that.
Sled item 12 was one fired bullet, determined to also be 300, most consistent with being 300 blackout caliber. And it was listed as from bedding inside doghouse.
And did you have an opportunity to weigh that projectile?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was the results of that?
When I weighed that projectile, it was approximately 146.8 grains.
147 grain unfired ammunition.
Yes, sir. I would say that would be consistent with 147 grains.
Very lastly, I'm going to show you what's been marked as state and entered into evidence as state's exhibit 143, 144, 148, and 150. Could you please remove those collectively and let me know if you are familiar with the make and manufacture of those items?
State's Exhibit 143 is a 12 gauge federal shot shell. It says Federal Premium Double Aught Buck 3-inch Magnum on this shell, on the side of the shell. State's Exhibit 144 is also a 12 gauge federal shot shell. On the side of it, it says Federal Premium Double Aught Buck 3-inch Magnum. State's Exhibit 148 is also a 12 gauge federal shot shell. On the side of it, it says Federal Premium Double Aught Buck 3-inch Magnum. And State's Exhibit 150 is also a 12 gauge federal shot shell with the same information of Federal Premium Double Aught Buck 3-inch Magnum.
Are all of those 4 exhibits that you just reviewed of the same manufacturer and same make and model?
Yes, sir. They appear to have the same information and also in their case, in their construction as well.
If I use one for demonstrative purposes, all the rest are the same?
Yes, sir. They appear to be all consistent.
Showing you what you just identified. This would be States 143. Is this the item you just looked at, Mr. Greer?
Yes, sir.
Showing you what's been marked as States Exhibit 34. Remind me again which item that is. Sled item 9.
State's Exhibit 34 was sled item 9. That's correct.
What's the make and model of that?
Sled item 9, State's Exhibit 34 was a fired 12 gauge shot shell with the Federal Premium Double Aught Buck 3-inch Magnum, red in color.
Showing you what's been marked as States Exhibit 399. This would be, where's item 9 from?
Item 9 is listed as from marker 9. And again, based on my understanding of the crime scene document, that was near or around the speed room.
It's marked as States Exhibit 399, sled item 22.7. Where is that item from?
Sled item 22.7, State's Exhibit 399, was the unfired 12 gauge shot shell that was originally submitted as item 22 with the camouflage Benelli shotgun.
States item 4, and you've already reviewed this. Exhibit 4 for the state, 22 for you. Is that the same shotgun that you're referring to?
Yes, sir. This is my item 22 shotgun.
Camouflage Benelli Super Black Eagle 3. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And all those items are of the same model and manufacturer. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. They all appear to have the same head stamp information and information on the side of the shell, and their case construction all appears to be consistent.
Reference your item 10 now. Well, first, let me collectively hand you what's been marked as States Exhibits 144. Sorry. States Exhibits 145, 146, 147, and 149 collectively. Please take them out individually, review them. Let me know if you recall what they are. Make and manufacturer is what I'm interested in.
Stakes Exhibit 145, it's head stamp Winchester 12 gauge with dry lock 3-inch and a 2 on the shell. Stakes Exhibit 146 is head stamp Winchester 12 gauge. On the shell, it says dry lock 3-inch number 2. Stakes Exhibit 147 is head stamp Winchester 12 gauge. On the shell, dry lock 3-inch number 2. And Stakes Exhibit 149, head stamp Winchester 12 gauge. On the shell, dry lock 3-inch number 2.
You guys indicate where those items were recovered?
Based on the packaging.
What is the packaging? Where does the packaging indicate those items were recovered?
The packaging for States Exhibit 145 says from a state box on bookshelf in gun room. States Exhibit 146 says from Kent box on bookshelf in gun room. States Exhibit 147 says from nightstand in Paul's room. And States Exhibit 149 says from a state box on bookshelf in gun room.
And hand you what's been marked and identified as States Exhibit 33, slide item 10. Where was that located?
Sled item 10, again, was a fired 12 gauge shot shell, head stamp Winchester 12 gauge on the side, dry lock 3-inch number 2. And that was located at marker 10, which again, based on my understanding, was near that feed room.
Identify, please, the make and manufacturer of that item.
Yes, sir. It was head stamp Winchester 12 gauge. And on the shell, it says dry lock 3-inch 2.
Is that consistent with the make and manufacturer of all the other items you just reviewed?
Yes, sir, it is.
Are those all the items you just reviewed, Mr. Brewer?
Yes, sir.
All right, no further questions from the state.
We'll take a few minutes break, ladies and gentlemen. Do not discuss the case.
Well, 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 well. Live rounds all over the place. What do you guys think of that? Unreal. Okay, let's see here. There we go. Beauty, beauty, beauty. Well, that was quite interesting, wasn't it? What the hell's going on that all these rounds are all over the place? How's he going to be able to explain all of this? So am I understanding right, you guys? Are they saying one gun, different ammo for some of this? I think that's the way I understood it. Unreal. There. Snow's melting. I like to see that. Now they've got the gazelles. They're all sleeping. Oh, no. Actually, I refreshed it. They all left. What do we got going over here? Nothing going on there. Oh, this is kind of nice. Let's pop over here. See some babies. Yeah, that's the thing, Blifton. Like, unreal. Unreal. They had guns everywhere. They even misplaced guns. How do you forget where you put your gun? Oh, that's it. And have they even figured out? They're saying that they had 3 of those, 300 black, I'm not an ammo person, blackout rounds. So what are they trying to say here? Like, did they lose one of those guns and it was replaced? It sounds like there was 3 of those guns out there. As far as that shotgun, are they saying that they put 2 different types of ammo, or I don't know what you call it, but inside those casings? Just careless people. Most people take better care of their weapons. Absolutely. This place was just a shit show. It really was. I've got that one picture where it's split. On one side, there's Paul having, like, I can't remember what they call it. Shotgun, I think is what we used to call it when you were a kid. Poke a hole in the bottle and it just gurgle. Well, there's one where his kid's doing it. And then on the other side, there he is, no shirt on, with a young girl, like, giving him a shotgun with the booze. I was like, who the hell is the adult? A lot of people say that Paul's attitude was very similar to his dad's. So if that's the case, it might make sense why they kind of bumped heads every once in a while, and why, I don't know, maybe he was able to get away with a lot of things that other kids just might not have. I haven't, Buster, I don't hear anything about him. I don't know what kind of kid he is. I know nothing. I don't know where he was when this happened. It's just, yeah, it's amazing. It is a mess, this case. Look at these 2, the ones trying to nap. Careless people, yeah. And careless with lives, It seemed like people were very much disposable. I mean, maybe he's innocent. I mean, I know they say innocent until proven guilty. But, every once in a while you see a case where it's like, I don't get you. I don't get you. I'm pretty sure you did something really, really bad. I've met people in my world through life that have done some pretty shitty shit. And I don't know, karma always comes back, doesn't it? It always comes back. You're better off to be a good person and sit back and let the shit show take care of itself. That's how I deal with it anyways. Let's go see if the other ones are eating. I'll go look. Mm-hmm. They're starting, I think it's cool because they're starting to pick at the fish and stuff. Alex and Andrea. Yeah, they're starting to figure it out a little bit. This is what mom and dad do. This is the very first time I've ever been able to see baby eagles. I mean, I've never seen such a thing. Did you guys look at Alec Baldwin? I read his PCA last night actually, and oh my, isn't that something else? Okay, just no, another one with just no worries about other people and their, their situations. It's heartbreaking. Not very much noise coming out of these two, so I don't usually put it on, but I like watching them. That little dark guy is just full of piss and vinegar. What's this? You don't forget. Unless you commit a crime with it, then it's definitely something you want to forget. Where you last put it. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I don't think his memory's failing him. They're pretty cute, aren't they? I would take one home. I've also got, the Racoon Saloon keeps timing out. But it seems like all the bowls are full. And I was saying earlier, like there's different parts of this house that they have cameras in. Oh my word. Oh my word. I'm glad to see it's dried up. I'm going to go back over here because this guy is, I don't know what the heck. He's got his tongue sticking out. I think he's, I don't know, maybe the beer's talking back at him. There we are. Why is this? See, he's got his mouth open. He or she. I don't know what that is all about. Does anyone know? Or does he just have his mouth like that for, I don't know. Is there a reason? Isn't that bizarre? Yeah, too much beer still, I think. Have the volume on for him? I'll turn it on. And nothing happening, just still the emblem. Yeah, the scenery with this one's just beautiful. They picked a nice place. That looks like an old nest. Looks like they've been using that for quite a few years. I love listening to them. I don't know, you call it screech? Loud. And like I've said previously, like they're so alert. Absolutely, James. Yeah. Squawk. Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah, absolutely beautiful. Big Bear Valley. I don't know where that would be. We've got a Big Bear out here. Like in Canada, there's a place called Big Bear, but I don't imagine it's the only one. Suppose I could Google it. Oh, there's a lot of different types of chickens. Isn't that something? Yeah, I didn't know either. We get these things, they're called odd and unusual sales, and they kind of bounce around Canada, and you can buy like from kangaroos down to, oh, everything. Oh, are we back? Okay, guys. Let's see here. We'll go back. They're bringing the jury in. I'm going to mute out, friends.
Sir, cross-examination.
Just want to see if we can agree on one thing, and that is you're not here to tell this jury that any of the weapons in this room were used, in your opinion, to murder Maggie or Paul, correct?
Based on my examination of the evidence, was able to identify that there were matching mechanism marks in items around, as mentioned, the body of Maggie Murdaugh and other areas of the property. And in regards to the two shot shells in comparison with those shotguns, items 9 and 10 were inconclusive with the item 22 shotgun.
So that means you cannot, and you did not, and you are not offering an opinion that item 22 shotgun was used to murder Paul Murdaugh, correct?
My result was inconclusive. And what that ultimately means is I'm not able to determine that. It's a possibility that it could have been fired by that shotgun, and it also could have been another firearm with similar characteristics.
Meaning it's just equally possible it wasn't that gun.
That's possible.
And this 300 blackout, we know of 300 blackout was used to murder Maggie Murdaugh, correct?
Based on the evidence that I received, I did have several projectiles that were 300 blackout caliber that were most consistent with that, as well as several cartridge cases that were head stamped that caliber.
And you're not here to tell this jury, in your opinion, that this 300 blackouts laying on the floor here was used to murder Maggie Murdaugh, correct?
The results of the comparisons of those cartridge cases, items 2 through 7, with test fires from that item 33 rifle were also inconclusive, meaning it's I was unable to determine if those cartridge cases were fired by item 33 or they've been fired by another firearm.
Well, how many cartridges were found at the murder scene of 300 blackouts? Do you remember?
Based on my understanding of the crime scene, I believe I was only submitted items 2 through 7. So that would be 6 fired 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases. And again, I was not at the scene to recover those. That's just what was submitted to me and based on my understanding of the evidence.
Okay. I want to stay on the 300 blackout for a moment, and I'm going to show you what we marked as Defendant's Exhibit 69. Excuse me?
Just what I previously.
Yeah. And you have your file there, but take a look at Defendant 69 and tell us if you recognize that document as coming from your firearms file report, excuse me, extended report.
Yes, sir. This State's Exhibit,
Defendant's Exhibit.
excuse me, yes, sir. Defendant's Exhibit 69 does appear to be a copy of 2 pages from my case file.
Thank you. Your Honor, we would move Defendant's Exhibit 69 in the evidence, I believe, without objection.
Not objection.
Submitted.
Yeah. This is page number 67 and 68. We're going to pull it up on the screen. And while we're doing that, Agent Greer, is this your worksheet for the 300 blackout that's here in the courtroom and sled item 33, which bears State's Exhibit number 88?
Yes, sir. That would be a copy of my worksheet for sled item 33.
Okay. And this is the item that you're not prepared to tell the jury here that, in your opinion, was not used to murder Maggie Murdaugh.
Based on my examination of the cartridge cases, or several of those cartridge cases that were recovered from all the locations, the results of those comparisons were inconclusive. I'm unable to determine if they were fired by that firearm or by another firearm or firearms with those similar characteristics.
But you did test fire this item 33, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
And on the second page of Exhibit 69, Doug, if you'll pull up the description of what happened, and if you'll tell the jury what problems you encountered when you test fired item 33, which is State's Exhibit 88.
Yes, sir. During test firing, I loaded the magazine with cartridges. That was sled item 34. And I inserted that into the magazine well of the sled item 33, the rifle. I chambered the first available cartridge into the firearm and fired it. That went as expected. The cartridge was fired. It extracted and ejected from that firearm properly. However, as that bolt was going back forward, I would have expected it to pick up the next available cartridge from the magazine. However, it didn't. And I had to manually cycle that bolt again to load the next available cartridge from the magazine. That issue did not prevent me from test firing it, and I was able to collect those test specimens that I needed. And no further analysis to determine the cause of that was conducted.
So when you say you had to manually, says as a firearm cycle, the next available cartridge in the magazine failed to feed in the chamber. So then you had to manually do it. How do you manually do it?
Yes, sir. On the top of the firearm, there's a charging handle. I had to pull back on that charging handle, which in turn pulls that bolt backwards. And when I did that and released it, it was able to then go forward on its own and pick up the next cartridge from that magazine that was inserted into the firearm.
And you had to do that every time you fired Exhibit 88, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I believe so. During my test firing, I did have that phenomenon occur.
So is it fair to say Exhibit 88, item 33 was malfunctioning when you tested it?
It did not work as I expected it to. I would have expected it to fire and load that next cartridge as it should. However, when we're test firing these firearms, we're holding them in different ways because we're test firing them in a bullet recovery tank, which at the time was a vertical tank filled with water. So I had to hold it in kind of a strange position. But through all my test firing, I did have this situation occur. But again, no other testing to determine why that was happening was conducted. And I was able to test fire that gun and collect those test specimens.
And it is fair to say you were not able to rapid fire, pull the trigger, pull the trigger, pull the trigger, and shoot bullets in immediate succession?
During my testing, I had to manually load that next cartridge in. So it just took the amount of time that it would take me to do that step, if you will. Instead of the firearm performing that function for me, I had to do it. And that's what I did in this case.
Okay. And then, all right, were you able to get the projectile out of the water tank and compare it to the two projectiles found at the murder scene? I believe, I don't know, it's item 8 or as part of your analysis, did you compare ejectiles from item 33 to the projectiles found at the scene?
Yes, sir, that is correct. I did collect those test fired bullets from our water tank, and I did compare that where appropriate with the fired projectiles that were submitted.
And did you reach any conclusions based upon that projectile comparison?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what were those conclusions?
Based on the observable physical characteristics of items 8 and 12, those are sled items 8 and 12, I determined those to be most consistent with 300 blackout caliber. Item 8 may be suitable for identification with other evidence, and item 12 sustained damage, and it was unsuitable for identification with other evidence. That means that due to the damage that it had sustained, there were no identifying features that I saw under the microscope that I would use for identification purposes. I also received several other projectiles and fragments that I compared to the item 33 rifle. Due to damage in their size, the calibers items 11, 66, and 137 could not be determined. They were just too small for me to make any determination about their caliber. Due to damage and the limited marks of value that I saw on item 11, specifically the fired bullet jacket fragment and the item 66 fired bullet jacket fragments, I was concluded that those may or may not be suitable for identification and compared those later on to the rifle. Based on that, no marks of value that were displayed on the item 11 bullet jacket fragments, item 11 piece of lead, and item 66 pieces of lead, Though I determined those were unsuitable. So again, due to there being no marks of value for me to compare, I was unable to compare those with those test bullets. Item 137 bore some type of strided marking. However, I was unable to determine the origin of those marks and use those for an identification purposes. And it was determined that it was also unsuitable. Lastly, the 3 items that I did compare with those test specimens that fired from those rifle, which were item 8, the item 11 fired bullet jacket fragment, and the item 66 fired bullet jacket fragments, the results of those comparisons were also inconclusive with each other and with those test specimens. And that was due to damage and just insufficient markings for us to base our opinion on. It could not be determined whether those items were fired by item 33 or by another firearm or firearms with similar characteristics.
So Exhibit 250 is the projectile that was found by marker 8, I believe. Just confirm that for me, please. Is that right?
Yes, sir, that is correct. State's Exhibit 250 was sled item 8, near tire impression at marker 8. That's correct.
And I believe you just, as you're reading from your report, told the jury that you couldn't make any conclusions about the projectile seized at the scene from the projectiles fired in a water tank from this 300 blackout laying on the floor here. Is that right?
That's correct. The results of those comparisons were inconclusive, so I'm unable to determine if item 8 was fired by the rifle or by another firearm with similar rifling characteristics.
Well, aren't the rifling marks on a projectile as it goes through the barrel more reliable when making firearm identifications than most any other tool marks that you rely upon?
I wouldn't say they're more reliable. We do rely on the rifling in that barrel to mark those projectiles, and that's what gives those markings on puts those markings on those bullets. So we're able to look at them and do a firearms identification examination on them. Tools, firearms, all mark evidence. Again, I was unable to do that in this case, and my results were inconclusive. I mean, that's due to the damage that these may have sustained and to just insufficient markings that were on the bullet when I looked at it. There was not enough of those markings on there for me to determine if they were fired by item 33.
But item 8, Exhibit 250 there, do you recall whether there was human organic matter on that projectile when it was recovered?
Let me refer to my notes. I don't have documented in my notes that there was any foreign material or trace on it as I received it.
But we know that that projectile was recovered at the murder scene at marker 8. Is that right? Near the top.
Yes, sir. Near the tire impression at marker 8. That's correct.
And you made comparisons of of shell cartridges, the back end of the full bullet that were collected at the shooting house on the property at Moselle. Did you not? I don't have the numbers, but we went through them a moment ago. You did. You remember? Let me ask you to take a look at the projectiles that were found. I believe they're items, well, nope. They are items 108 through 125. I'm not sure what their state exhibit numbers are, but if you look at 108 through 125 in your report, those are spent 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases.
Sled items 108 through 125 was determined all to be fired 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases.
And in your report, it references left of shooting chair near field, right front corner, et cetera. Maybe you don't know, but, or are you aware those were collected at a gun house at a firing range on the property?
Yes, sir. And I'm going to back up. I misspoke earlier. It's 108 through 124 are the 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases. But based on my understanding of everything, yeah, there was some type of shooting field or stand that I believe those were collected from, and that kind of seems to coincide with the item descriptions, which is what I'm familiar with.
Okay. And were you aware that when you're sitting in a shooting house and you're on target practicing, that there was a earthen burn that the shots were fired into?
No, sir. I've never seen this area.
Okay. Would it have been helpful to your analysis if investigators had dug out items from that earthen burn of the projectiles, such as what's sitting in front of you as State's Exhibit 250?
We're able to look at bullets that are submitted. We don't have any type of restraint. It may have been helpful. Bullets, as we've seen here, come to us in all shapes and sizes due to their damage that they may have sustained. So I'm unable to really answer that question without seeing the evidence and determining if it would be helpful.
Okay. I want to ask you a little more about the conclusions that you reached as documented in your report, and I've particularly focused on item 128, and I'm still talking about the Buster 300 blackout that's laying on the floor here in the courtroom. And just so we're clear, there were items, the cartridges that we talked about, the back end of the bullet, that you were able to conclude that they were fired by this gun, right?
Yes, sir. I was able to determine in looking at the totality of the marks on those cartridge cases that there were items submitted to me had been fired by that firearm.
And your conclusion that they've been fired by this gun, and we're talking about the cartridges. One is cartridge 38, which is up by the residence, correct?
Yes, sir. Sled item 38, that's my understanding. And it was submitted as being recovered from near a door.
Well, and that's the door that you testified that you saw when you went on the property.
Yes, sir. I believe so. That's my understanding.
And so it's been a long week, 2 weeks, but there was a sled agent early in the case who had body cams going around picking up spent shell cartridges adjacent to that door, and you believe this is one of those, correct?
That's my understanding, that those items came from the area outside that gunroom door.
And you concluded that item 38, along with some other items found at the shooting house, which would be, 109 and 110, you concluded. And where 109 and 110 found? Yeah, that's the shooting range, correct?
Yes, sir. As submitted to the lab, item 109 was collected from right front corner near field, and item 110 was in front of shooter's chair under table near field.
Okay. And so one spent cartridge found next to the door up at the house, main residence at Moselle, and then you've got 5 found at the shooting range that you say, in your opinion, were fired by this gun.
Yes, sir. That is my opinion.
But then you've also matched other cartridges, according to your report, items 111, 114, 115, 18, 19, 123, and it says 128. in your report that you say were loaded into, extracted, and ejected from this rifle.
That's correct.
But you don't say they were fired from this rifle.
That's correct.
But they were spent shell casings found at the shooting range, correct?
Yes, sir. And those were fired cartridge cases in it's just plain term. They had been fired. When I'm looking at the totality of all these markings, again, we go back to those 5 areas that we're really going to look at. The marks that I saw that were in agreement, that I made that conclusion and based my opinion on, were those ejector or lug and extractor marks. And that's not what detonated that primer. So that's the difference there. So we know those marks can occur when that cartridge or fire cartridge case is cycling through there, but that's not what detonated that cartridge. And that's the difference in that result. Yes, sir.
Well, let's look at it from the other side of the coin. So you're saying that the breech marks on the primer, where the firing pin hit the primer, did not match up. Items, rifle 33, the breech marks on the firing pin didn't match up on these spent cartridges. 111, 114, 15, 118, 119, 123, 128.
No, sir. When I did compare all of these cartridge cases to each other and with those test cartridge cases fired from it, those items, 111, 114, 115, 118, 119, 123, and 128, due to insufficient corresponding markings on that primer and in those breech face marks, I was unable to determine if they were all fired by item 33 or by another firearm or firearms with similar characteristics. I did examine those, and the results of those comparisons were inconclusive.
So you're saying you didn't, you're not telling jury they don't match. It's just you couldn't match them. They're inconclusive.
My results of those comparisons were inconclusive. Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you also in your report reached the same, you conclude that it's inconclusive on whether item 33, State's Exhibit 88, are you saying it's inconclusive whether item 33, Exhibit 88, fired 2 through 7?
That's correct.
Are you saying it's inconclusive as to whether item 33, which is Exhibit States 88, at some point in time, loaded and ejected, extracted from item 33?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Well, we just talked about there's a difference between firing and then cycling and extracting
Yes, sir.
tool marks.
Yes, sir.
Did you look at State's Exhibit 88 to see if the extraction marks matched up to items 2 through 7?
Based on the evidence that I received, I was able to determine that items 2 through 7 had those matching mechanism marks with items 35 through 37, 39, 108, 113, 116 through 117, and 122, to conclude that those items have been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
But you can't identify the firearm, the gun.
Right, correct. In terms of being fired by, I was able to determine that several items have been fired by that rifle, and the results of those comparisons with the other items, items 2 through 7, 35 through 37, 39, 108, 111 through 120, 122 through 124, and 128. Those comparisons with each other and those test cartridge cases fired by the item 33 rifle were inconclusive.
And so let's see if I can understand what you're talking about with regard to your conclusions on that items 2 through 7, which were shell casings found near Maggie's body and other spent cartridges found around the Murdaugh house and at the shooting range, you conclude that they were loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
That's correct.
And for those, I guess we have the same issue. You looked at the primer, the breach marks on the primer, and you couldn't make any conclusions on those, right?
When I looked at the primer area where those breech face and firing pin impressions are, the results of including that in a fire-by result were inconclusive. And that is the results for items 2 through 7, and 35 through 37, 39, 108, 111 through 120, 122 through 124, and 128.
And again, aren't the breach marks in the firing pin, aren't those more reliable than extractor marks when you're doing an analysis?
During the marking of these specimens, if you will, through firing, the machining process to create those firearms, we see tool marks on fire cartridge cases and fire bullets from multiple different processes. I can't say that one's more reliable to mark than the other. It's all due to the machining process and also due to the individual wear and tear of that firearm through use of it in repetitive use or abuse of the firearm. That can also add to the markings in each of those locations that we're looking at, whether it be something from the breech face, from the firing pin, those extractors and ejectors, or even the rifling in the barrel. All of those variables can play into those markings and how we see those and how they reproduce on our evidence and how individual they are to each gun.
Well, that does bring me to another point. Isn't your opinion based upon conclusion that every 300 blackout manufactured in the world, whether it's put together by John Bedingfield or mass assembled at Palmetto State Armory or anywhere in the world, that each one, when they cycle a bullet through and eject it, will produce its own unique, like no other in the world, its own unique tool mark? Isn't that what your opinion is based on?
Again, during the manufacturing of these components.
Is that a yes or no?
I would like to explain it a little more.
Your Honor,
if
can I get a
possible.
yes or no and then an explanation?
I'm objecting. You can answer the question.
Restate the question.
Isn't your opinion based upon the presumption or the basis of your opinion is that every 300 blackout manufactured in the world produces its own unique set of tool marks when it cycles a bullet through? Yes or no?
I would like to answer that with a little bit of explanation if possible.
Your Honor, I would appreciate a yes or no, and he can explain all day long.
If you can answer yes or no, you must answer yes or no, then explain.
Can you repeat the question one more time? I apologize.
Is it your opinion, in this case, about the shell cartridges being fired from the same 300 blackout? Isn't that based upon your presumption that each 300 blackout manufactured in the world makes unique tool marks when it cycles a bullet and ejects it?
It's hard to say. I have not looked at every 300 blackout that's in the world, so it's hard to answer that question. But again, based on my knowledge of that process and how they're made, I'm able to support my answer without answering it in a yes or no manner, I suppose.
But you're saying you found shells here, cartridges here, cartridges there, cartridges at the murder scene, and they all have not all the marks are identical, but enough marks are close enough to being identical. In your opinion, they were fired by one weapon in the world.
It's my opinion that those had all been cycled through the same firearm at one point in time. Yes, sir.
But not fired by the same firearm.
No, sir, that's not what my conclusions say. As far as being fired by that firearm or by the same gun, those results are inconclusive.
So that means that the markings on the breech, because they were all fired, they all have a fire pin hitting the primer, and you call that breech markings, correct?
Yes, sir, those are breech face markings that we would see on the primer.
And there were dissimilarities between those where you couldn't reach a conclusion.
That's correct. Those shared, again, those same class characteristics. So we compared those to each other. Based on our comparisons, that's correct. There were not enough, there's not enough agreement. There was insufficient agreement there for me to reach a conclusion based on my training and experience and looking at all of these cartridge cases that I could say that they were fired by the same firearm. And that's how we arrived at that conclusion.
And can you say when those tool markings were made on the, or when the, scratch that. Is there any way to determine, for you to determine when the shell casings, cartridges were cycled and ejected in this one firearm that's unique to all others in the world? Like,
I cannot date when those were fired or when those were loaded into, extracted, and ejected from a firearm. No, sir. I cannot put a time stamp, if you will, on that. No, sir.
and you can't state whether it was a 300 blackout assembled in 2016, given for Christmas gift, or if it was a replacement given in 2017 or 2018. I mean, you don't know what year the gun was that cycled and ejected.
That's correct. I do not have knowledge on the year of manufacture of these firearms.
Okay. Now let's move on to the shotguns. And you were clear a few things up. You were shown a lot of items that were taken, unfired shot shells. And this is 12 gauge. I'm gonna show you exhibit 143, 144, 145, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way to 50. And I'm not gonna ask you to take these out, but I want you to take a look at all those and tell me when those were seized or taken into evidence in this case.
I do see a date on the packaging. Some of these packages are ripped right through it. That states 9/13/21.
Okay. And so you understand that is June, July, 3 months after these murders, correct?
Yes, sir. That September 13th will be several months after the murders. Yes, sir.
And that those were seized at different places around the property?
Yes, sir. According to the information here, it appears they were from different locations where they were collected from. Yes, sir.
Okay. And I guess you don't know whether, I mean, the property of Moselle was open to Alec Murdaugh, I mean, from June till September, as far as you know, right?
I have no knowledge of that. No, sir.
And if he had the mind to, he could go out and remove every every shotgun shell on the whole property, right?
I have no knowledge of how the scene was maintained.
Well, it would appear that no one removed any shotgun shells since you have them there in your lap, right?
It does appear that these were collected from these areas listed on the package on September 3rd, or I assume it's September 13 as it's dated and labeled by the person who collected these.
Okay. Let me show you. Exhibit 63 and 60, what I marked is exhibit 63 and 64. And these are pages 51 and 55 from the report. And will you just confirm this for me? 63, 64, pages 51 and 55 from your report.
Yes, sir. I do recognize Defendant's Exhibit 63 appears to be a copy of an item 10 worksheet for the fired shot shell. And Defendant's Exhibit 64 appears to be a copy of my worksheet for sled item 14, which were 24 birdshot pellets.
Thank you. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce in the evidence defendant 63 and 64 at this time. And just, Doug, if you'll pull up 63, which is page 51 of the report, and Agent Greer, will you tell the jury what this is?
Yes, this is just a copy of one of our standard worksheets that we use to document evidence in the laboratory. So this is an ammunition and cartridge case worksheet, which is why I utilized it when I was documenting the item 10 fired shot shell. And this contains my notes that I took on that item.
Okay, and just so that we're clear, are we talking about Exhibit 33? This is the black colored shot shell that was found in the feed room where Paul Murdaugh was murdered.
Yes, sir, that is correct. State Exhibit 33 is the item we're discussing.
And you have a name under notes. It says on shot shell, says, quote, dry lock 3-inch 2. You see that?
Yes, sir, I do.
You see that, Doug? Can you highlight that? Thank you. And again, the exhibit there, and that's what you're talking about, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And number 2 is the size of the pellet.
Yes, sir, that would refer to the size of the pellets or birdshot that was that we would believe to have been loaded into that cartridge or that shot shell, excuse me.
Okay. And then if you'll go to Exhibit 64, page 55, Doug, and it's 55 in your report, Agent Greer. And are these the pellets that were provided to you to analyze the number 2 size pellets?
Yes, sir. Sled item 14, I determined to be 24 birdshot pellets, and those were listed as being from dog food storage room.
Okay. And if you'll look at under the caliber, it says number 2, and it says steel. These were steel pellets, were they not?
Based on my examination, based on my observation, yes, sir, they were magnetic. So that would provide that they had some steel in them. Yes, sir.
And birdshot can either be steel or lead, I suspect. Maybe there's a third kind.
There can be multiple different metals used in making pellets. Lead is one, steel is one. There are also other metals that can be used in making pellets. Yes, sir.
Have you analyzed any of the Winchester dry locks that were seized in September of 2021 to see whether they're steel or lead?
No, sir. I have not analyzed their contents.
Okay. Now here you've got Exhibit 64. You've got grain weight, and won't you explain what you're referring to? I guess I needed. I'm missing a page for that. So if you'll look at your page 54 in your file, because it says continued from weight, and I guess that's on page 54. Is that right?
No, sir. That's just referencing from the weight category. That's kind of at the top portion of the page.
Okay.
I just continued my thoughts down below.
Well, so help me out here. You say there's 5 pellets weighed 3.4 grams, and then 18 pellets only weighed 3.6 grams. How does that work?
I weighed each of those pellets individually. And again, we're weighing in grains. And when I weighed those on our scale, that is what I documented. 5 of them weighed 3.4, and that should be a piece. 18 of them each weighed 3.6 grains, and 1 pellet weighed 3.8 grains.
Okay.
So the total of them altogether was approximately 86.4 grains.
Great. Thank you for explaining that. You also weighed the grains of the 300 blackout projectiles. And you don't have that in front of us right here, but did you not weigh the grains there?
Yes, sir, I did.
And if you got it, just tell us what they were. I have my notes here. I believe you said 147 grains. States Exhibit 50, which is your item 8 on your report.
Yes, sir. When I weighed sled item 8, which was 1 fired bullet, it was approximately 147.4 grains.
And are you familiar with how 300 blackout ammunition is sold? What weight classes there are?
I don't know all of the different weights that are within that caliber. No, sir.
Do you know there's like a subsonic and then supersonic?
Again, I don't know everything about that caliber. There are various weights that bullets are sold in for each caliber. So I would not be surprised at other grain weights, but I don't know all of them off the top of my head today.
So as far as you know, the only weight you could ever get is 147 grains, right?
When I weighed these items, item 8 and item 12, they weighed approximately 147.
You mentioned in your testimony that item 32, which is Exhibit 91, had a Winchester and a Federal 12-gauge shotgun shells in here. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir. They did have 2 unfired 12-gauge shot shells submitted with it. That's correct.
But you did more than that when you testified shortly ago. You said one was a Winchester and one was a Federal, I believe.
Yes, sir. One is a Federal premium heavyweight TSS. and one is a 12 gauge Winchester Longbeard XR, I believe.
The Winchester is not a dry lock, correct?
No, sir. The markings on that shell said a Longbeard XR.
Okay. And the Winchester found at the murder scene is a dry lock, correct?
The item is 10 shot shell, which was recovered from marker 10, which I do believe, my understanding is that around the body of Margaret Murdaugh was a Winchester 12 gauge shell, and it says dry lock on it. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. And then item 22, which is the gun that Murdaugh came down, was holding or was leaning up against his Suburban when Deputy Daniel Green arrived. That was, if you understand, loaded with a 12 gauge and a 16 gauge shell, correct?
When I received it, it was unloaded, but I did receive a 12 gauge shell and a 16 gauge shell. That's correct.
If you fire a 16 gauge shell and a 12 gauge shotgun, what's likely to happen?
That's something that I have not done, so I'm unable to answer that question.
Is it dangerous to do such a thing?
As a firearms examiner, I would recommend shooting the ammo that your firearm is chambered for. I can't predict what would happen if you shot that shot shell or attempted to.
All right. You spoke of this review process at SLED with regard to your tool mark analysis, and you said you do your analysis, you look at things under a microscope, and you type up a report.
Yes, sir. I look at the evidence, reach a conclusion, and write or type those conclusions. Yes, sir.
And then a reviewer, someone, and in this case, what was the name? Initial CW?
The reviewer was Chad Smith, another examiner within our department.
Is he on the same level with you at SLED?
He is also an examiner. I don't know his classification, but he has been employed in the department longer than I have, completing firearms examination.
Okay. And then he looks at it, but does he prepare an independent report and then flips the two over and see if they match, or does he just take a look at it, come up with his thoughts, and then look at your document to see if he agrees with it?
He does not prepare an independent report. No, he does look at the evidence and arrive at those conclusions, and he would read my results. If he agrees with them, then he will sign off on those conclusions. If he disagrees with them, then there's also a procedure for that to happen.
Now, you mentioned that in order to make an identification or a match, or you have to have a certain number of similar, or is it similar or identical characteristics?
In order to make an identification, we want to see sufficient agreement between the individual characteristics. There's not a certain number that I use, as we use a method called pattern matching. And we're looking at, under the microscope, all these tiny striations and impressions, and looking at the surface contours of those two tool marks with each other. And we're looking at those individual peaks and ridges and comparing those under high magnification in order to make an identification. And based on that, through our training and experience at doing this job, we look at thousands of comparisons conduct thousands of comparisons. During that time, we look at things that match each other that we know have been fired from the same gun or made by the same tool, and we look at things that have been fired by separate guns and see if there's any agreement or disagreement. And we look at thousands of these cartridge cases and bullets and tool marks in order to learn what that sufficient agreement is to make our identification.
Okay, and you gave this jury an analogy like a ladder, and that you have to get up so many steps as you reach. The first step, I guess, would be rifle or shotgun, right? And then the second step would be caliber of rifle, if we're talking about a rifle, and then you keep going up the ladder.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're going to look at those class characteristics. So we're going to determine if, one, if they're the same caliber, do they share the same rifling specifications if they're a fired bullet? If they are, then we can compare those. If, for instance, if a bullet has 5 lance and groove and it's going to the right, and we compare that to another bullet that has 6 lance and grooves and it's going to the left, then we know those did not come out the same barrel. So there's no need to do it in any type of comparison there. However, if we look at 2 that have those same lance and grooves, those 5 lance and grooves, and they're all going to the right, they're the same caliber, then we'll go up that ladder, if you will, and compare those individual characteristics to see if they were fired by the same firearm or not.
Tell this jury how many steps of that ladder you have to go up before you can make an identification.
As far as making an identification, it's based on the marks that what we see under the microscope. When we're looking at all of these marks, we want to see that sufficient agreement. Again, we want to see enough agreement so that what is there is better than any agreement that we've seen in tool marks that have been created by different tools. And that's learned on the job, doing this, doing practicals that I did in training, looking at thousands of comparisons of things that I've test fired, that I know were fired from the same gun, looking at things that I've test fired from different guns and looking at that. It's also done through studies that I participated in training. I'm looking at things that help us know what that sufficient agreement is within all of those features and looking at the totality of those markings. So we're not going to base our opinion just on one little mark. We're going to look at the entire surface area of that bullet, the entire surface area of that cartridge case in order to make our conclusion. We're not looking at one little mark and making an identification. So we have to think of the totality of all the markings that we see under the microscope.
So the short answer to my question, there is no set number of steps on the ladder you have to reach before you can make your decision.
We use a method of pattern matching again, and that's how we do it. And that's a widely accepted method throughout all firearms examiners in the United States and the world, really. That's what we've been using for years to complete firearms identification, and that's what's been widely accepted, looking at these patterns and comparing them in order to make our identification and reach our conclusion.
Well, now you say it's been widely accepted, but isn't it true that that your field of expertise has come under criticism by the scientific community?
There has been criticism, but again, there's been research completed to support firearms identification, if you will.
Well, I mean, the National Academy of Scientists issued a report and was pretty critical of the objectivity of your work, that it is more subjective because you don't have a set number of ladder rings on a ladder you got to reach. It's based upon your experience, your training, and your opinion, but there's no objective criteria by which to measure whether something matches or not. And that you're aware of that criticism by the National Academy of Scientists, right?
I'm aware of some of the criticism, yes, sir. However, the process of making the identification is subjective in nature, but it's based on some objective data that we're looking at. There's, again, lots of information that we're looking at, the contours of those tool marks, the individual peaks and ridges of those tool marks, and looking at it, it's not just looking to see is this a match and it looks good. We're really looking under high magnification at all of these features to see what agreement or disagreement that we can determine. And again, that's based on some objectivity, of how we arrived to that situation.
But you agree that your chosen field is part art as much as science, right?
Our field is an applied science, really. We do use lighting and angles to look at these features under the microscope, and it's important to know how to move those items around and move those lighting and those different stages on our microscope in order to see some of these markings. It can be difficult to do, and there is a special technique that you have to learn in looking at this and doing it and using that microscope to really become familiar and efficient.
Do you agree with me previously in this courtroom under oath that this profession you're in is part art?
There is some art to it, and that's just the lighting thing. For example, we have to look at that, and we have to use that oblique lighting in order to make some of those striations show up. Again, these are tiny little marks that we're looking at under magnification. But the field itself is not art. It's an applied science. We're using scientific processes to reach these conclusions with years of research to support it.
You first examined item 22 back in June of 2021, correct?
Yes.
Which is the shotgun that Alec Murdaugh had that was taken by Deputy Green, right?
Yes, sir. Item 22 was a Benelli model Super Black Eagle, and I did receive that item in June. Yes, sir.
And when did you receive? I'm not going to pick it up again, but I dropped it, and it's almost past 5 o'clock on a Friday. I don't want to create a bit more of a delay, but when did you receive the 300 blackout?
Is that the item 30 rifle?
Yes, sir.
Referring to? I received item 33, which was inside sled container K on June 10th.
And when did you issue your preliminary opinions on item 33 and item 22 to your agency, SLED?
I released some results to our agents and investigators on June 10th. Yes, sir.
Are you aware after June 10th that SLED dive teams have been going out in Colleton County, diving the waters, trying to find murder weapons?
I'm not aware of what all our dive teams were doing. No, sir.
Well, you certainly didn't report to the folks who were relying on your work that we found the murder weapons, did you?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
You didn't report to the folks at SLED who rely upon your analysis that, hey, Eureka, we got the murder weapons.
No, sir. That's not what I reported.
And you've never received any projectiles from the shooting range at Moselle to compare.
Objection, Your Honor, ask an answer.
I haven't asked my question yet. Have you ever received any projectiles from the shooting range at Moselle to compare to the projectile item number 8?
Possibly, but you can answer it again
Yes, sir.
if you've answered it before.
Based on my understanding of the scene, I do not believe I received any projectiles from that shooting area. But that's based on my understanding of where I believe the other projectiles were recovered from.
When you got item 22, the shotgun, do you know whether it had been swabbed on the inside of the barrel?
I believe it had been processed by other departments. However, I do not know what those swabs entailed.
If a shotgun has been recently fired, does it leave evidence in the barrel, that soot stuff?
Yes, sir. It's possible that we would see some type of residue from firing in that barrel.
And are you aware that Agent Worley swabbed the top before she removed the 16 gauge shell from it?
No, sir. I do not know what Agent Worley did in this investigation.
Can you see residue with the naked eye of a shotgun that just recently been fired?
Sometimes, yes, sir. And that is something that we also document as part of our examination of the firearm. And when I looked into the barrel and looked down the bore of the item 22 shotgun, I do have in my case file circled that I noticed some fouling or residue in the barrel.
Was it recent fouling or residue, or was it just a dirty gun?
I can't date when that fouling was placed there. That residue was placed there. No, sir, I can't put a time on it.
What about the 300 blackout? Was it? I think you have a note there's some fouling there, but maybe I'm confusing it.
Yes, sir, that's correct. On the item 33 rifle, I did note that there was some fouling or residues in that barrel.
The opinion that you have provided this court as to the shell casings from the murder scene, which are sled items 2 through 7, and that your opinion is that they were loaded into, extracted and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time with items 35 through 37, 39, 108, 113, 116, 17, and 122. And those are shell casings that were found around the house and at the shooting range. Your opinion that they were loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm. Do you hold that opinion with 100% certainty?
Yes, sir. That is my opinion. That is the conclusion that I reached.
Did you ever tell Agent Owen that you could not forensically state with 100% certainty?
No, sir. When I arrived at that conclusion, that was my conclusion. And it was also agreed upon by the reviewing examiner.
So if there's a note in Agent Owen's report that you couldn't reach it with 100% certainty, then someone has made a mistake?
I don't know the contents of Agent Owen's report.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Allow me to ask a few questions.
So I'll stand for a moment.
Mr. Greer, I'm handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 400. Could you kindly review that very, very quickly and let me know if you're familiar with what it is?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
This appears to be a copy of my report.
It's an accurate, complete copy of your report.
Yes, sir, it does appear to be.
All the things we just discussed today.
Yes, sir.
State would move to admit item four, State's Exhibit 400, I believe about it.
Okay.
Mr. Drew, please, because some of the questions concerned your field. Please tell us, how long has firearms identification and tool mark identification, how long has it been around?
In its current form, I would say the early 1900s is when this really became popular, and firearms identification was born with several important cases. It was as early as the 1900s that they started looking at this evidence and looking at those individual characteristics through microscopy. So ever since that time, it's just evolved and grew with further research and support, advances in technology, and but it's been around for several years.
And are you familiar with any studies that were done utilizing what would be called consecutive barrels?
Yes, sir.
Firearms? Explain to us what a consecutive barrel study would be and what's done in those.
Sure. When we're looking at those characteristics under the microscope that were imparted onto a fired bullet or a fired bullet or a cartridge case, we're looking at all those tiny little features. A consecutively manufactured study takes into the account of the manufacturing process. So all those marks that we discussed are coming from that gun being produced by a manufacturer. Metal scraping and removing metal. So we have tools cutting and tool stamping and really working on hard metal surfaces. So when we look at a study that has consecutively manufactured things, that presents an opportunity for a worst case scenario for us as examiners. If those tools were going to leave markings on other firearms, so if you had this breech face being made by the tool and it made the next one, those are consecutively manufactured. If there's any carryover of those characteristics from one to another, that's what that study does. It highlights that and it puts that as an emphasis as part of that study. And we as examiners are looking at that, that's our worst case scenario. If we're going to see any carryover of that tool making that item or that breech face, we would expect to see marks. There's several studies that are out there, and I've participated in several of those as part of my training, where we're given samples that have been fired by consecutively manufactured barrels. So if we see any agreement between each of those barrels, we should see it there. Or studies where we have consecutively manufactured breech faces. Again, those are breech faces made by the same tool, one right after another. And if we see agreement in there, we should see it in that study. I've participated in those studies, in those research projects. Some of them have been studies prior to me becoming an examiner. And I was able to clearly distinguish and accurately distinguish between those projectiles. So I was able to determine those projectiles were fired by this barrel, this barrel, this barrel, and this barrel, or that cartridge case was fired by this gun with that breech face, this gun with that breech face, and this gun with that breech face. So we are aware of that in our community, and we do things to be proactive on that. And that's just an example. And that's something I participated in and was able to successfully pass as part of my competency in determining what was fired by what in those consecutively manufactured studies.
And you were able to compare firearms. Talking about, I'm referring to items 33 and 22 on your report. That would be the item 30 and item 22 on the camouflage Black Eagle 3.
Yes, sir.
Your results for some of those were, when you say inconclusive, what does that mean? Does that mean that they could have been fired or that you just can't determine?
That's correct. Inconclusive is one of our conclusions that we can issue when there's not enough agreement or disagreement there in those tiny microscopic characteristics. So what inconclusive means is it's possible it could have been fired by that gun, and it's possible that it may not have been fired by that gun.
attention to states, to your item number 165, States Exhibit 147. Remind us again what that item is.
Um, Could I see item 165?
Make me find it.
Sorry.
It's fine. Would you be able to find it in your report if you have it?
No, sir, I'm not sure that I'll be able to find it.
Yes, should be here. Unfortunately. 146. There. All right, I'm handing you what's, and I know the evidence of states 147, that would be slide item 165.
Yes, sir.
Did you identify what it is again and where it was located when it was found, more importantly?
Yes, sir. This was a Winchester 12 gauge shot shell. And on the side of the shot shell, it's stamped dry lock 3-inch 2. On the packaging for States Exhibit 147, it says from nightstand in Paul's room.
Now, I know council asked you a question about, your field being an applied science, just so we understand what an applied science is. Are there any other examples of fields that are applied in that general realm of applied sciences?
Yes, sir. A lot of what we do as firearms examiner is learned through our process of training and looking at samples and learning the job. It's kind of like, if you will, a physician. They go to school. They learn a lot in their medical school, but they still do a residency program, if you will. So they're on the job, doing on-the-job training.
Comparing what he does to,
Objection overruled. May continue.
Yes, sir. So they learn things in school. Firearms identification is not something that you can necessarily go to a school and learn to do. You can't get a 4-year degree and become a firearms examiner the next day. There are universities across the nation that have firearms identification as part of their firearms program, and they're teaching that component. But in order to achieve your competency at this, you need on-the-job training. You need the experience in looking at these samples and knowing how to evaluate the markings that we're looking at on these ammunition components.
Lastly, Agent Greer, Mr. Greer, I'm going to refer you to States Exhibit 400. I'm going to put that on the screen. I'm going to direct your attention to item 128. Can you see that on your screen, Mr. Greer?
Yes, sir, I can.
Specifically, your findings concerning 2 through 7. You see where my pen's pointing?
Yes, sir, I do.
Which items were 2 through 7?
Those were from markers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 respectively. And from my understanding of the crime scene, those were the ones that were located around Margaret Murdaugh's body.
Okay. And again, we're on what page now, Mr. Greer?
That's on page 7. Yes, sir.
Items 2 through 7 found around Maggie's body. Items 35 through 37 and 39, where were those located?
Those were from the side entrance door, which would be the door, I believe, coming out of the gun room area.
And items 108, 113, 116 through 17, and 122, where were those located?
Those were from various areas thought to be from the shoot field or from the field.
And tell me again what your conclusion was.
I was able to determine that based on matching characteristics in the mechanism marks that items 2 through 7, 35 through 37, 39, 108, 113, 116 through 117, and 122 had all been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Further examination.
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may step down. And while he's preparing to step down, ladies and gentlemen, we will recess for the remainder of the day and the weekend, and we'll need you back at 11:30 on Monday morning, 11:30. Please do not discuss the case.
So I don't think that that means there will be nothing happening Monday. I just think that they'll be going through vetting more people. That seems to be what they're doing, and then get the jury in later instead of having them come and then sit in that jury room. So guys, wow, that was quite the week. We learned lots, actually. I'm going to go through my notes. I'm actually going to watch some stuff that I probably missed. Let's see here.
Which witnesses will you have?
Your Honor, if we're talking about the in-camera hearing, we'll have Mark Tinsley. And we do have another issue, which I believe I had indicated to Your Honor perhaps in a pretrial conversation as to a conversation that took place a few days after the crimes occurred, in which there were a number of individuals present. Mr. Murdaugh was present. I don't know the contents of that meeting because I've been out of an abundance of caution, have stayed away from that. And I believe that we may have a little bit of testimony just on whether or not there is any attorney-client privilege to that conversation. I've been careful throughout this investigation preparation not to be privy to that, but I do believe that it is not an attorney-client privilege conversation, but I'd like the court's ruling on that before I became privy to the contents of that. That's the only other issue at this time that I think would be addressed in camera that morning.
Your Honor, and sort of a surprise here, were those conversations recorded?
No. And I mentioned this in our pretrial.
I know what you're referring to. Neither one of us know what the contents of those conversations are.
I believe Mr. Griffin was present at this meeting, which is exactly why I wanted the court's ruling before I became privy to the contents of the defendant's statements at that meeting.
We're not quite sure, but we'll wait with bated breath to hear whatever it is.
Can you be more specific as to what you're talking about, Mr. Waters?
From my understanding, there was a meeting or some sort of gathering in which Mr. Griffin and Mr. Murdaugh and then a number of other individuals were present, in which the defendant made some statements. The contents.
Individuals?
No. I think some of his partners and other individuals, maybe some family, to which I have never been privy to the contents. However, I would like to know the contents, but I've been careful out of an abundance of caution not to ever become privy until I had a ruling from the court that there was no attorney-client privilege because of the presence of third parties to that conversation. So I would like to address that with the court, and if the court believes that and rules that there is no attorney-client privilege, then I may, at the appropriate time, examine people who were present at that conversation as to what the defendant said.
And is that in relation to financial crimes or?
No, sir. That would be in relation to the murders of Maggie and Paul. But it is an in-camera matter that if we have the time available, I wanted to raise that with the court. Maybe we can go ahead and knock that one out as well.
All right. Any thoughts by the defense?
Your Honor, what he's referring to is, it was on Thursday, June the 10th, when SLED came to John Marvin Murdaugh's hunting property to interview Alec, to interview John Marvin Murdaugh, Randy Murdaugh, Buster Murdaugh, and I was there to represent Alec for purposes of that. Before SLED got there, we were all in the house. I have no idea what beyond that he's talking about. I mean, what was supposedly said or heard, or I have no idea, but beyond that. don't know of any conversations that he's trying to find the substance of and who he's going to get them from.
Your Honor, I think that's just it. We would have a witness as to the circumstances of who was present, and in the event that Your Honor rules that because of the presence of third parties, it was not a protected conversation, then I would then, become privy or asked to become privy to the content of that. And again, that isn't
Asking by inquiring of who?
well, the witnesses who were present. And so I'm going to call one of those, which
The law
could be
partners?
exactly. And again, I wouldn't even have to do that on the stand. I would just want Your Honor's blessing before I did that because of an abundance of caution and protection of the attorney-client privilege. At that point, I could, offline become privy to the content of it. It may be nothing. I've just been told that there was that meeting and the circumstances of it, and I don't believe it's protected. And so I'd like to know, what the defendant said at that meeting.
Yes, sir.
Sounds like he's asking for a deposition, Your Honor. And he's got no right to an evidentiary hearing about what happened at a meeting in the course of a trial. He's got no right to compel people to come testify so we can find out what was said. That's discovery. I mean, state grand jury allows him to do that, but there's no rule that permits him to conduct a deposition, whether in court or out of court. And that's what he's trying to do.
Not asking to conduct a deposition, Your Honor. I've actually been doing this out of abundance of caution and protection of the defendant's rights and making sure that we didn't cross the line without the court's input. And again, the content may be something that's useful or not.
Well, if you'd like to brief or send a memo or cases to the court regarding statements made in the presence of counsel and third parties, whether that's protected by attorney-client privilege or not, then the court can address the issue.
Yes, sir, Your Honor. And I'll be happy to address that Monday morning. I will. I do have a case, Marshall v. Marshall, 320 Southeastern 2nd 44, which just generally, of course, states the rule that if attorney-client privilege communications are related in the presence of third parties, then the protection is lost. And I can go ahead and hand that one up to Your Honor. And I certainly be prepared to address that in greater detail. Monday morning. And obviously, if we prepare additional ones over the week,
Anything further?
nothing from the state, Your Honor.
In defense, Your Honor.
All right, we'll be in recess till 9:30.
All right. So, okay. Well, I'll be interested to see what happens with that. It sure made Alex and his lawyer squirm, so there's probably something to it. I mean, I can see it. I can see everyone getting together. Oh, prosecution is sneaky. You bet. But you know what? He's on the up and up. So, yeah, I'm liking him. I'm liking him. Okay, friends, it's been a long week, so I'm pretty much ready to go. Actually, I got to do some research. I'll do that, and then I'm going to chillax. So, with that said, again, thank you ever so much for spending the time with me, guys. I really do appreciate you. And I will see you tomorrow is Speculation Saturday. So that is Mexi and I talking about basically whatever kind of comes up. I'd like to talk about Koberger. Oh, okay, I guess that's done. Oh, yuck. So yeah, looking forward to that. So you guys have an awesome night, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.